Investigators continue to try to determine what caused last month's deadly Amtrak crash in Philadelphia. We know the train 188 was going way too fast as it entered a fairly sharp turn just beyond 30th Street Station, but we still don't know why. There's been speculation about a variety of factors, and there have been suggestions that train slowing equipment could have saved lives had it been in place in the stretch of track where the mishap occurred. Deborah Hersman is one of the nation's most respected safety experts. She's the former head of the NTSB. She now serves as president and CEO of the National Safety Council. Welcome. Great to have you here.
Good morning.
The timing is fantastic. It's good to have you here. We'll talk about the Amtrak situation and other important topics in a moment. Talk to us, if you would, for a second about National Safety Month. What is it that you at the Council hope to accomplish?
You know, people talk a lot about plane crashes or even train derailments like the Amtrak in Philadelphia, but really the things that are most risky for Americans are not those unique or unexpected and very rare events, but the things that happen every day, the things that we're dealing with every day. It's motor vehicle crashes, drug overdoses, particularly prescription painkillers, and for older adults, it's falls. And you know, it's simple things like trips and falls. And so people are much more likely to be injured or killed in those ways, not in a shark attack or a lightning strike or even in an earthquake. It's really the things that we deal with every day. The most dangerous things are in our medicine cabinet and parked in the driveway. And
for each of the things you mentioned and others, there are things that if we're smart, if we're sensible, yeah, we adopt those safety practices in our own lives, or maybe we heed the admonitions of our parents and our kids and our grandkids to do small things that can mean a lot if it prevents a mishap.
Absolutely. And so the great news is here in the D.C. area, we've got states that are doing a good job at some of these things. Maryland is actually the safest state in the nation when it comes to unintended injury deaths. D.C. and Virginia are also in the top 10 when it comes to safest states. And so they are taking steps and doing interventions to help prevent these deaths. For example, in Maryland, the Allstate Foundation has partnered with the National Safety Council to start up teen safe driving coalitions. Maryland has one of those coalitions. There are 10 across the country, and they've reduced their teen driving fatalities by 50% in the years that they've had that coalition. Great progress, but it's simple things: buckling up, not drinking and driving, and for sure putting those cell phones away when you're behind the wheel.
And we're entering a time of the year when I believe the statistics tell us that teen crashes go up because school's out. It's a time to have fun, to cut loose a little bit. It means more time behind the wheel or more time as a passenger in a car that's being driven by another younger person. So we know this is a time when we should double down on the common sense things, on not being in the car with someone who's driving we don't care for, buckling up, all the rest of it.
Absolutely. You actually nailed it. It really is a time, you know, in the summer where we're all on vacation or going to barbecues and doing fun things, but those risks really multiply in the summer months, and we actually see July is the worst month of the year when it comes to unintentional deaths and injuries. Long holiday weekends where there's a lot of time on the road and perhaps a lot of partying. You know, the drinking and the driving is really a deadly combination.
We'll talk more about National Safety Month in a moment. Obviously, we're all focused on the situation in Philadelphia. Many of us use Amtrak. This was a very frightening situation, given that it appears the train was going twice the speed that was prescribed for the area. You're the former head of the NTSB, so you're not in the middle of the investigation now. We know that, but you have investigated. You've been on the scene and been deeply immersed in probes like this one in the past, given the hat you wore. What thoughts do you have about what may be some of the likely factors as we begin to know more? What do you think we're going to find out?
Well, the good news is that the NTSB does very thorough investigations, and sometimes those can seem painstakingly slow for many people who might be observing, but they're really putting a lot of data and a lot of information together. You know, one of the things that's come to light recently is looking at the records, the phone records and other things of the operator. That is standard practice. They do that in every single investigation. They're going to put preservation orders. They're going to be looking at those. Sometimes people have multiple devices. Many of us do. And so it's about corroborating all of that factual information. And so they will be looking at all of those things. But one of the most important things is prevention on the front end. And whether it's looking at the human beings to help them to be safer, be more attentive, or it's looking at technology to help prevent crashes. Those are all things that they'll look to recommend.
Where do we stand as a nation in terms of the technology that's available, understanding that funds will never be unlimited and you won't be able to put the latest device in every place that it might be beneficial all the time. There's always going to be a gap. I think that's just the real world. We should endeavor to be as safe as we can, but understanding that perfection will never be attainable. But where do we stand in terms of deploying available technology in places where we have the money and where it could be of use?
Well, the really heartening thing was this week we had a hearing on Capitol Hill. Administrator, the acting administrator for the Federal Railroad Administration, Chairman Hart of the NTSB, and Joe Boardman, who's president of Amtrak, all testified. And Joe committed in that hearing Amtrak will implement positive train control on the Northeast Corridor by the congressionally mandated deadline, the end of this year. And he said what PTC really represents is the biggest commitment to safety, the biggest change that railroaders can do in their lifetime. And so that was really good to hear that from him. Unfortunately, many times we see in safety, people don't make the changes that need to be made until after there's an event that really forces it.
Are there other steps you'd like to see us take?
You know, I think there are always challenges, and the NTSB has looked at for years things like fatigue, things like medical issues, whether it's sleep, testing, getting, you know, all locomotive engineers tested for sleep apnea. We know that there's a lot of challenges out there, and as you mentioned, there aren't unlimited resources. It's about prioritization and identifying where those risks are, not just the everyday risks, but the really low probability, high consequence events that we need to make sure never happen.
With the Arlington Memorial Bridge suffering from corrosion that has led to the closure of a lane, we have been focusing a lot on how, as a nation, we are billions and billions behind on upkeep, on road and bridge infrastructure upkeep, maintenance. I think a lot of people view this as an inconvenience issue, but really, when your roads and bridges are crumbling, they are unsafe, and it is more than simply a matter of inconvenience. Fair to say?
Absolutely, and I was in a cab and I rode across the Memorial Bridge last night, and I asked the driver, you know, what he knew about the bridge. And I think it's just really an example to all of us, a very tangible, visible example that we're going to lose lanes, we're going to lose capacity. There are certain vehicles that are not going to be able to traverse that bridge. Great job for the safety engineers to actually identify this issue and point it out to make sure that, you know, that bridge is safe for the folks who are traveling across it. But a real problem across our nation, good investment in infrastructure is good for business. We've got to figure out how to make sure that we not only take care of things, but we invest in them for the future.
What can we as a public, what can we as a nation do when our leaders are aware of the problem but refuse, presumably because of a political calculation relating to their own political futures? What do we do when it's not as though our leaders don't get it. They know the problem. They just don't have the political will to deal with it. How do we move forward?
Well, I think ultimately as a nation, you know, we do defer to our policymakers to make the decisions on our behalf. The challenge is when some of those decisions really have long-term consequences and the costs are really borne over a long period of time. You know, we're so fortunate when we look back at some of the infrastructure that was built in this nation. I mean, we have, you mentioned you're from New York, we have bridges that are in New York that were built over 100 years ago, built to really withstand growth and change and development. We really have to get into the mindset where we're investing for the future. The U.S. used to have fantastic infrastructure compared to the rest of the world. Unfortunately, we're really falling behind now.
To drive around is to see people multitasking behind the wheel. Distracted driving, I think, is an epidemic. If that's a mischaracterization or an undercharacterization, you know, we're here to hear from you. I'm